The earliest memory I have of my mother taking me to the tar tree began at the bottom of the stairs. Growing up, I was not allowed to go up the stairs in the back hall of the store. I wasn't sure why, since Mom said they led up to our apartment. I would hear her tell others that they are not safe to use and she can't afford to fix them. So when she told me it was time I used the stairs, I assumed she finally paid to have them fixed. I was wrong. Truth was, there's nothing wrong with the stairs. In fact, those stairs are very unique. Those stairs hold a secret. A secret that my mother shared with no one, not even Aunt Beatty. She only shared it with me. Those stairs go to a specific destination, and it is not the apartment upstairs. She led me to the back room one morning before the sun was above the buildings. She asked me if I remembered the story of the Albright's Promise. It was a nursery rhyme she sang to me for as long as I could remember, so of course I knew it. She smiled and told me that the way to open the door to the stairs is in the song. I didn't know what she meant at first, but then she told me to look closely at the door. I stared at what always seemed like a normal interior door. But the longer I stared, the more things moved on it. Shapes. I could see different shapes and symbols on the door, dozens of them. She said using our gifts, we trace with our fingers the correct order of symbols for the door to open. She said that the door would open to a path of friends. Friends that would always be there to help us anytime we needed it. She showed me how the song tied into the symbols as I recited it for her. This is the journey of the Albright's Promise. The journey starts with the witches 3. The watchtowers, the kings, and Hecate. Then came the earth, the wind, the fire. The shadows brought their own desire. The lone witch brought the razorback. The moon and the will keep them on track. With Jesus' love comes the brother, to seal away the buried mother. We opened the door together that first time. The grain of the woods carved into my memory like it's my own body. Mom swung the door open and I couldn't believe it. It was like I was in my own fairy tale. Through the doorway I could see a clearing in the woods, and a long dark tree waited for us at the edge of a cliff. I had no clue then the dangers my mother was trying to show me, to prepare me for. Mom told me about the tar tree, that its roots were the tomb for the buried mother, and that the seal on the door was the same seal used to lock her cage so she can't get out. She said that she calls upon her friends by touching the tree, the friends that would help her anytime she called. I remembered the buried mother from the song, but she wouldn't feel real until the first time the seal cracked while I was alive. But that wasn't until later, until after the first time I opened the door to the tar tree by myself. One morning, when I still wasn't tall enough to reach all the symbols without a stepladder, I woke up and Mom wasn't there. I made the trek down the big outside stairs to go to the store and see if she was down there getting ready for the day. The back door was unlocked, but she was nowhere to be seen. Worst case scenarios played out in my head. Some bad guys come to rob the store and took her. She went to the store and got hit by a car, all sorts of terrible things that I couldn't stop thinking about. I shouted and screamed for her, but no one heard me. In my panic, all I remembered was that my mom's friends would come and help anytime she called, so I decided to call them to help me find her. I grabbed the step stool and recited the song as I used my powers to open the door. It was the first time I drew on my power like that by myself, but because I was riding the energy of my fear and panic, my power came easily, even at that small age. I opened the door and ran straight to the tar tree. The shadow of the mountain kept the clearing dark in the early morning, but I didn't care. I had to call on my mom's friends for help. Once I made it to the tree, I looked for the hand. Mom told me there was a handprint on the tree that worked like an alarm to her friends to come quickly, but she never used it in front of me, just showed me where it was. It wasn't hard to find. The hand stands out as a pale contrast to the dark bark of the tar tree. I remember reaching for the hand, but pausing, noticing how small mine was compared to the print. I wasn't sure if I was big enough for it to work, but I had to try. I had to find my mom. I placed my hand a little higher than the center so that my fingertips would reach at least into most of the fingerprints, in case it was like a hand scanner like I saw in the movies. I was wrong. I didn't know how wrong until I felt the prick in my palm. I squealed and pulled away in pain, staring at the bloody spot just below my middle finger. Why did the tree hurt me? Was Mom wrong about it all? Was no one coming? Between my pain and fear, I just finally let myself collapse against the tree and cry. I was all alone and no one was going to help me. It took me a minute to hear the wind blowing through the trees over my bawling. I remember thinking it was strange to hear the wind, but to not feel it. I looked up in the gray morning light of the mountain cliff and saw him. Though he was clearly not human, he immediately showed as a him in my young eyes. My fairy tale wonderlands. His body was the stirring of leaves and grass and twigs and the swirl of his elemental energy. His face the churning fog drifting through the trees. I remember the song. I remembered his place in it, and was not afraid. Cautious and suspicious, but not afraid. He asked how he could help. His voice came and went as if he wasn't here at all, as if he was miles away, and his distant echo carried on the breeze. My power flooded over me, cocooning me and reaching for anything it could, including him. I was happy that I could read him like I could read all the others. He was worried and curious. There were no ill intentions in him, so he became my fairy tale companion in this twisted, all-bright journey I found myself in. I stood up and I told him I couldn't find my mom, that I'm scared and alone and didn't know what to do. 2 others approached, a woman and a man, though the man felt like more than a man, but it was the wind man I felt safest with. The woman spouted her words at me as if I shouldn't be here, as if I wasn't worth helping. The man that was more than a man was not bothered by my calling like the woman. He didn't seem to care at all. It was like he came excited for something else, and all he got was me. He left as quickly as he came, but the woman stayed. Her demeanor changed once she got a look at me. I remember, once she bent down beside me, that I touched her braids. Her hair felt rougher than what I knew hair to be, but with rough hair, a stoic face, and jewels that sparkled in the coming daylight, she looked like the queen of this fairy tale land. Good or evil was yet to be decided. My magic tried to pour over her like it did the wind man, but she blocked me. I thought she must be gifted like me and my family, and would know how to find my mom. I told her I lost her and that I have to find her. The queen called me sweet child, and the wind man's touch wasn't rough like the scattered leaves, but warm like a summer breeze. I broke down again, feeling safe now with both of them. And that's when my mother came. She had been down at the river, thinking I would sleep for a while longer. We rushed to each other. I was so relieved I cried all over again. Through her relief was her panic. Why was I here? I told her my logic, that her friends would help me no matter what. She looked up at the 2 who remained with me and thanked them for coming. The windman waved as he left. The woman warned my mother to teach me better about this place. That's when she told me the buried mother story again, and that her friends were only there to help when called to make sure that she stays buried. But I had to ask more about who those 2 were. The woman was Nadette, and the windman was simply called Gale. My mother told me never to open that door again without her, and I abided by that rule until the day she died. I waited 2 weeks after my mother's death, and honestly, I'm surprised I waited that long before I flung that door wide open. It was on the cusp of my decision to descend into the darkness that was the devil's service. I opened that door, fully prepared to make that decision based on what the group had to say to me that night. And we know how that played out, don't we? I bloodied my hand by hitting the tar tree over and over until my knuckles stained the bark. Nadette, Aunt Beatty, a man I didn't recognize, and all 3 representative bodies for the 3 covens were the ones who answered the call. I had an audience of more than half the group of the circle of the buried mother, including 2 of the witches I blamed the most for her death. My rage could not be contained. I screamed my demand, my power engulfing the whole clearing. No one dared to move. I wanted to know why they left her alone in this. Aunt Beatty tried to calm me, but quickly gave up that endeavor and prepared for the worst. And the worst was what I had to bring that night. But I didn't. Not that night anyways, because of Nadette. She pushed past my rage, fought against the tide of my swarming power in the clearing. Part of me let her. Part of me didn't push back against her courage or wisdom or compassion, whatever it was that pushed her to come closer to me. She still hid her intentions from me, but I didn't need my power to tell me what was on her mind. I could read it in her face. She sympathized, but was not sorry. She felt the loss of my mother as well, but knew it had to be done. Bullshit. Bullshit. They shouldn't have left her alone in this. For years they were there to help her. Why not that night? Maureen and Nadette tried to tell me there was no other path forward, that one of them had to make the sacrifice. Then it should have been one of them. Not my mother. It should have been one of them. I took the reins on my unbridled power and focused on sucking the life out of each and every one of them. But they were too much for me. If I had come at each of them one at a time, I could have done it. But I couldn't face them as a group. No wonder they were the ones chosen for the circle. They were strong as hell. And yet they couldn't contain the buried mother? They had to sacrifice my mother? In the end, it was Nadette's fist that did me in. One good punch to the face after I was weakened by their magic. Nadette rubbing her knuckles and shaking her head was the last thing I saw before I passed out. I woke up to the cold morning dew on blades of grass tickling my face. Once again, I was that young girl in the clearing alone, searching for her mother. But this time no one would come. I was on my own. I cried like I did that first time, but eventually the crying stopped. The nothingness set in and made my choice to serve the devil come easy. 16 years have passed. Maureen, Roz, and Aunt Beatty, along with the rest, have done their duty resealing the buried mother. With Roz dethroned and Aunt Beatty on the cusp of death, I'll have to keep my promise one way or another and play my part in resealing her. But this time, I have a new plan. This time, we're going to play out what should have happened the night they left my mother to face that bitch alone.